Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's Ellechat. It's so good to see so many of you tuning in today, especially from all over the world. I love when we have an international audience in here. It's really fun. So if you haven't already, feel free to say hello in the comments and let me know where you're tuning in from today. I want to make sure before I keep going that you all can see me and hear me okay. So in the comments, if you could just say hello and let me know, that would be awesome. See a lot of you from Charlotte in here too. This is great. Awesome. You can see me and hear me. Thanks, guys, for letting me know. I'm really excited about today's Ellechat with Brit because if there's anything that can make a website or social media account look like a brand new website or social media account or someone who's just starting out, it's photos. You can put a lot of effort into your designing a great logo, a great website, great graphics, but if you don't have solid professional photos for your brand, it'll all fall short. And so I know that photography, if you're not a photographer yourself, and I definitely wouldn't consider myself one, photography can be a very intimidating thing to approach when you're starting a business. So I am really excited to talk about just 3 simple ways with Brit today that you can improve your brand photos, and even if you don't have a DSLR. So before I invite Brit on, though, for those of you who are new to Ellechat, how many of you are tuning in to Ellechat for the first time? How many of you is this your first Ellechat webinar? Wow, a lot of you. Awesome. So welcome. Glad you're in here. Below the video screen, below me right here, you should see a questions and topics section. And this is one of my favorite parts of Crowdcast because you can go and leave your questions in there during the webinar. And then you can also read the questions that have already been asked and vote them up. And at the end, I usually leave about 15 or 20 minutes for a Q&A. And so we'll go in order from the highest votes down. So feel free to leave questions there and vote them up. And it looks like you all have found the comment section already. So yes. So I'm going to go ahead and invite Brit on. And it takes just a second. So bear with me. Brit, if you could leave a comment, that would be awesome so I can find you. Yes. Okay, awesome. So let me invite her on. We'll wait just a moment until she joins us. Yes, if you all are having a hard time with getting the video to load, try using Chrome or Firefox instead of Safari. Safari can act up a little bit. Those of you on Chrome, it's working all right, right? There she is.
Hello.
Hello, Brit. Thank you for
Hi.
joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So everyone is telling us where they're tuning in from. Where are you tuning in from today?
I am in Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
Lancaster, Pennsylvania. I actually have a sister-in-law in Lancaster.
Yes, I remember you saying that.
Awesome. I wonder if we have anybody from Lancaster tuning in today.
I think I saw a few from Pennsylvania. Maybe they're...
Yeah, that's awesome. So, Brit, tell us a little bit about what you do and how you started your business.
Well, my very first business, I guess technically I started maybe 5 years ago. I was a photographer. I was a family photographer, and I got my first camera when my son was born. And I really got into photography and wanted to make it my business and realized that there was so much more to business than just taking pretty photos. And I got into a lot of online classes. I was trying to market my business. I was moving all over the country and trying to restart my business every couple of years. And that education and the marketing education actually led me to getting a job with a photography resource company out in Portland, Oregon when we lived there. And that was wonderful. And I really enjoyed that experience. And about a year later, I got another job as a product photographer / blogger for a company in the wedding industry. So being a product photographer / blogger kind of opened up this whole other world where I just really saw how important images were on social media and on your website. And then we moved back to Pennsylvania, and now I started the Inspired Editorial, which my goal for that is to just provide tons of education and inspiration for creative business owners who have a great product or a great service, but have no clue really what to do on the business portion. So I'm hoping to provide really easy content for people that want that business, but they're not sure what to do with it.
That's awesome. I love that. And I love your background in photography too, that you've not only done product photography, but you've also done family photography and for blogs. It's so helpful. So in talking about brand photography, we're just going to dive right in.
Yeah.
What are brand photos specifically? For those who are tuning in and might be a little unsure about that terminology.
So for me, I think brand photography, it lives the same place that your actual brand lives. So wherever you are and your photos are, that's brand photography. So on your website, on your social media, if you sell products, your product listings and the photos that you have there, if you have an Etsy shop, your emails, just anywhere that your brand lives and you have photographs, that's your brand photography.
And why would you say that brand photography is important? I touched on it a little, but
I think it's incredibly important for a number of reasons. If you have a product, I think photographing your product in the most professional way really elevates your brand and your products. You make your brand look more professional if you have images of high quality where everything's lit in a nice way and everything has correct white balance. I think if you can keep everything consistent, you make your brand look a little bit more recognizable. If people see images on your website and then they go to your social media and they're like, oh, this is the same person or the same brand. I think it's incredibly important to have everything really cohesive throughout wherever your brand lives.
I agree. And I think especially if you're just starting out, you don't have to look like you're just starting out.
Right, exactly.
Photos can really elevate it and make it look like you've been doing it a lot longer because quality photos kind of give off the impression that it's a quality business, that they know what they're doing.
Yep.
So I love that. And I think it's, I know for my business too, I had some stock photos taken specifically for Ellen Company when I first started my business. And I think that's one of the best investments I could have made. I didn't necessarily purchase them. I traded services with a photographer. But it was so nice to have consistent images, and it made me look a lot more legit than I probably was at the time. So so I agree. They're so important.
I always recommend, if you can afford it, which it's hard in the beginning, to get those professional photos and hire somebody whose background is taking photos of a business or your headshots or your products. But now with Instagram and even Snapchat, your day-to-day is photographed and put in front of your audience. So I think it's so important to be able to take decent photos with any camera, every day.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, when you're first starting out, you may not have the means to have someone on your team or have anyone on your team to take photos.
Exactly.
And because of social media, it is really important that you're able to take them yourself. So we're going to talk about that and how you can improve your photos right where you are right now, whether you have a DSLR or you just use the camera built in on your smartphone too. So what is the first way that people can improve their brand photos?
So my first tip for having more improved and higher quality brand photos is to choose a specific color palette for your photos. If you've hired a brand or a graphic designer to do your brand professionally, you probably already have a color palette chosen. So that's great. That's a great place to start. And if not, I would just kind of ask yourself the same questions that a graphic designer would ask you. So, talking about who your target audience is, what do they like? What are they looking for? And what message you're trying to send. So if you are a calligrapher and you want to have this gorgeous, really feminine, light, airy brand, your images should match that in the same way. So maybe you'll have some pinks, or maybe you'll have a lot of neutrals, or maybe you're trying to appeal to men and women, which is really hard to do right now. Especially for me, when I was doing the Inspired Editorial, I wanted to appeal to men and women while still trying to be feminine, which was a really hard task. So I tried to keep pink out of my color brand or my color palette, which was sad, but you know, you gotta do what you gotta do.
Right. And I think that's, oops, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I think I love that you said too that to think about your ideal audience, because as a graphic designer, yes, you can infuse parts of your personality in your brand, but you should really, every decision you're making should be about whether or not it's going to appeal to your ideal client or your ideal customer. And I had a client one time, she was a wedding planner and she wanted to appeal to Southern brides. Yep. But she told me, yes, I love the colors purple and teal. Mm-hmm. And those were her favorite colors. Yep. And while she may have loved those, for a Southern bride, it probably wasn't the best choice. So we went with more navy and peach and blush and, you know, those kind of Southern colors. But I love that you said that.
Yeah, I think really thinking about, the person on the other end of whoever is going to see what you're putting out there and who you want to attract, their opinions and what they're interested in and what's going to really grab their attention, especially in the world of scrolling and, you know, you have to grab somebody's attention in a split second. And I think having a color palette that's going to pop out and really speak to your ideal client or your ideal audience is really important right now.
Yeah. So do you have should you do specific colors and only do those colors, or is it okay to kind of do colors that are somewhat similar so it isn't quite so matchy-matchy? What are your thoughts on that? How do you approach it?
I guess it depends on your brand and what resources you have available. So for me, I started out with, I had my brand done professionally, and my graphic designer gave me like 4 to 5 colors. Most of them were just kind of like an ombre of the same teals and blues. And then I have white in there, and we use black a few times. So I try to keep those colors, at least one of those teals kind of in most of my images. But then, it's not always possible. I do quotes sometimes that are just black and white. I think choosing maybe 5 colors and trying to keep at least one of those present in every image or everywhere that you have your brand, I think is important. And white is one of your brand colors. And if you can do that, I would just try to keep it consistent maybe with your neutrals and the different colors that you have.
Yeah, for mine, that's what came in handy with my brand colors because I use a lot of bright colors. Yep. So white with pops of color. Yep. And it doesn't always work that way, like you said. Right. Sometimes there are some exceptions, but for the most part, it also helps that my space is kind of white with pops of color.
Matches your brand.
My brand transcends just the internet. It also goes to my clothing and my house. But that isn't always the case for people either. So do you have any suggestions for how to go about that if your office doesn't necessarily match your brand colors, or how do you stick to that color palette if your life doesn't look like that color palette?
So for me, so I guess my life and my brand are 2 very different colors. If you can see, my office is pink and gold. I wear pink every day. And like I said, I tried to keep pink out of my brand. So there's not much pink in my brand. So what I did was, when I was planning my colors, I actually took my little sheet that my designer gave me with all of my brand colors, and I went to Home Depot and I got paint chips and paint colors that matched as closely as I could, that matched my brand colors. And then I created backdrops with just plywood and paint, and that's what I shoot on. So I don't do much shooting in here, but my actual, where I take pictures, everything's kind of streamlined and matches my brand because those colors and those backdrops match my branding.
Yeah,
and I did the same thing with props. I try to have props that are matching the rest of my brand, and I kind of keep those peeking through the rest of my photos.
Yeah, that's awesome. Do you have like photo shoots where you like set aside a time and just take a bunch of photos all at once?
Oh, yes.
I know I'm skipping ahead to another part of this, but
I mean, it'll come up anytime.
yeah.
I think that my number one recommendation when you're taking brand photos is to do it in bulk. I tell people that, and I try to tell myself that, and I still don't do it as consistently as I would like to. But yeah, if you can just set aside a few hours in your week or your month, and you have everything planned out, you have social media, you know what you're going to say in the next month, you know what blog posts you're going to have. And if you can just kind of plan that in advance and then take some time to take photos with, you have your props set up, you have whatever you need to buy. If you're like me, I have flowers a lot. So I go to the farmer's market and make sure that I have some fresh like greenery to take photos. And I just will just pop out a bunch of images, like maybe 50 images, just to get me through the next month of blog posts and social media posts. So yeah, definitely if you can do it in bulk, and that will also help with consistency too. I think your whole feed will kind of, match itself because everything's kind of coordinated.
Yeah. And if you're going to take the time to take one photo, you might as well go ahead and knock out a ton.
Exactly. It'll save you time in the long run.
And I know from personal experience that some days I'll be like, oh crap, I want to post, but I don't have a photo on hand and it's an overcast day, or I don't have the time to set up an image. And so it's really nice to have it on hand so that you can pull from it. And hopefully I'm trying now to exercise a little bit more intention, especially with Instagram. My other accounts, I don't struggle with quite so much, but Instagram, you want to have that great image.
Exactly.
So I need to be more intentional to plan it out and take photos in advance too.
Yep.
So that's awesome. So do you have some examples of color palettes for people who are still figuring theirs out, or just examples of good color palettes?
Yep. So actually, I wanted to mention, I have a photo styling worksheet that I think will help everybody. If you go to the button that's on there, that will take you to my most recent issue. And I also threw in 2 downloadable PDFs that you can print out and kind of brainstorm what you want your brand and your photos to look like. So I have a couple examples. I wrote them down just in case I forget them, which I do. So I think every brand is so unique and different that if you can have a color palette that kind of speaks to your brand and speaks to your personality and then also speaks to your audience, you're doing a great job. So one of the examples I had was a neutral color palette. And the reason I like neutral, you can kind of talk to men and women. And I think that's really important right now. I feel like in the creative industry, men are kind of shunned out because there's so many women here and so many creative entrepreneurs that are female, and they just have pink everywhere, which I love. Obviously, I love pink, but I try to include the men when I can. And I think it's also neutrals are really simplistic. It's light and airy. So I always picture like wedding brands that are trying to talk to the grooms as well as the brides. I think that's important. Another color palette that I really like right now, and I kind of see it, it just kind of depends on what your personality is, but gold, black, and navy to me is a really fun color palette that kind of screams elegance, maybe high end and quality, and it's glamorous. So, if that's who you're trying to speak to, those 3 colors, and then, whatever other colors you want to throw in there. And that's kind of still pretty gender neutral, but still a really specific, specific audience. Pastels are gorgeous. And I think that's a little bit more feminine, but you can still kind of, depending on, I have a lot of pastels in my brand, and I'm still sort of speaking to the men. So that's one way to kind of still have the laid back, airy feel, but get a little bit more gender neutral. And then one of the others, I think I saw a brewery with these colors. It was black, charcoal, and gray. and it was really masculine. And they even brought in some wood tones. So that was like definitely trying to talk to men and trying to talk to people that were way more masculine than the feminine floral light colors.
Yeah, definitely. I love that you said the gold and like dark neutrals is very glam.
Yeah.
If you can pull it off. I think too, something to think about with your brand photos, because you said it allows you to be very recognizable.
Yep.
I think a lot of people tend to just gravitate toward what everyone else is doing and not think about their brand color palette as really helping them stand apart from what other people are doing. So I love that the examples that you chose, especially like that one in particular, the dark neutrals and gold, can really help you stand apart from others in your industry, because the creative industry is inundated with people who are doing similar things, and your brand gives you an awesome opportunity to stand out. So, yeah, great examples. I love that. So, number one thing for improving your brand photos, or the first tip that we said, in case you're just tuning in or may have missed it, is to use a cohesive color palette. So that's a great one.
Yeah, choose it in advance and try to incorporate it whenever possible. It's not always possible. And if you look at my Instagram feed, you'll see that I have a lot of dark green happening right now, which is not in my brand colors, but there's some white, which is part of my brand. So I think it works out.
I find that I go through like phases.
Yeah.
Like if you were to scroll down, it would look a little bit different every time. Still within the same color palette, but it's always interesting. And then I always think, oh, I need more of this color in there. So like have a notebook in there that's a certain color. I don't know if you ever do that too, but just to try to balance it out among the squares of my feed. Especially for Instagram, but also, and I feel like I'm gravitating toward Instagram on this, but also on the blog and other places that people are seeing my photos too.
Yeah, Instagram's definitely front of mind right now, because you can see 9 images or more at a time. So you kind of, you get the whole picture. But even on places like Pinterest, where somebody might be seeing your pins for the first time, and then they come back a second time and they see those similar colors, you're so much more recognizable if you don't have the pink and gold and black or whatever other colors your competition's doing. If you can stand out, I think it's a great way to kind of be recognizable to that target audience.
Absolutely. I'm copying your Instagram handle. Someone asked in the
awesome.
So I'm linking to it. Here we go. So you all can find Brit there at the Inspired Editorial. So you all can see her feed. You're welcome. But yeah, so even if you maybe go off of the color palette once in a while, if you just stick to the same colors, trying to be within the same color palette, it can make it look so much more cohesive and intentional and high quality. So I love that you mentioned that tip. I think it gets overlooked a lot.
Yeah, I agree.
What about tip number 2?
So tip number 2, I think this is the most important tip, just as a photography tip in general, not just specifically to your brand photos, but I highly recommend utilizing natural light whenever possible. So for those of you that are scrolling through my feed right now, I don't think there's a single image that was taken with artificial light. And I'm 99% sure that every image that you're seeing was taken with window light. Or maybe outdoor light with that most recent photo, because it was outdoors. But I think natural light, for one, especially for beginners, there's no learning curve with studio lights and trying to figure out flash or, whatever else is out there. I've never learned studio lights. They scare me. And I really love the look of natural light. So my big recommendation, if possible, obviously we don't all have a north-facing window, but if you do, you will have the most beautiful light probably at all hours until the sun goes down. And I actually set up my little studio across the hall in my north-facing guest room if we want to take a look at that. So I was going to take my computer over there.
Absolutely. I love that. I know I've known photographers who buy houses based on the light in their living room and like It just,
It's a
yeah.
thing. It's
I love
definitely a
having
thing.
this light in here. That was like a selling point for this apartment. So I love that.
I chose my office because it was actually already pink. And then there was already that chalkboard wall. So I was like, that's definitely going to be my office. But then, you know, a month after moving into this house, we moved in December, I was like, oh my goodness, it's not a north-facing window. So I actually took over our guest room and
you
put
can
my
see
studio.
the difference in light.
Isn't that funny? So this is where I shoot. So that's my window. That's north-facing.
I love that.
So what north-facing means is that you're never going to have a huge sunspot. The sun will never be shining into this window, which is really nice. But if you, obviously, not everybody can get a north-facing window. So if possible, you can put up a really sheer curtain so you still have that pretty light. And then that's one of my plywood backdrops that was painted with colors that kind of match my branding, and then a bunch of other backdrops, and then my table that I sometimes pull out. But this is what my studio looks like. I
love that you have like a space assigned for taking.
I took over too many rooms in my house. That's my guest room.
I need to have like a board that I can lay down on the floor and do better flat lays. I'll find myself, the light will come in through this window and I have the desk right here. And so I'll just try to get above, but it's not very easy. So I love that you have a station.
Yeah.
I think that's awesome.
It's nice.
Yeah. And so the reason it's good to have a north facing window is because the sun never beams right in.
Yep.
And just to clarify for some of the people about that sheer curtain, is that because it kind of diffuses the light so it isn't quite as harsh if it is beaming through that window, if you don't have a north facing window?
Yep. So in my current office, this would be a south facing room, which means the sun starts over here and then it just kind of shines in all day long. I have two huge trees outside of these windows, so now I don't get really any sun, but in the wintertime, I'll just have huge sunspots shining in. And I used to have that big table right there. So what I would do is I put up these curtains, which are they're up there right now, but it would catch the light that was shining through. That way I still had like some light coming in, but it wasn't that like bright, warm sun. Yeah, just sitting on the products, or whatever I was shooting, which just made them not as attractive as like that light, effortless light that was falling in the other room that I showed you.
Right. I love that. So, especially for, I think, natural lighting, I didn't realize until I had just gotten started with my business that lights, like lamps and overhead lights, not only do they cast different shadows, whereas with natural light, the light's coming from one direction.
Right.
But I also have I have lights that are like yellow.
Yep.
So is that why too you would suggest natural light over?
Yes. So, in addition to natural light being so attractive to whatever you're photographing, the color cast can just create, if you have yellow lights on, like a floor light or even a ceiling light, it's going to make things either blue or yellow. And if you're trying to sell products, I think it's so important to make them as true to life with their color as possible. If you have clothing or something that you want people to see, like this is actually the pink that you're going to buy when you open the package, this is what it looks like. So yeah, any artificial light, it's really hard to get things with that true to life white balance and the true to life color. So natural light's definitely the way to go with that.
Absolutely. Not as much color correction having to go on if you're doing natural light. And you can even tell, as I'm scrolling through feeds, I can tell when someone left a light on in the background. Yeah. There's just this yellow kind of like glow.
Yeah.
Even I'll find if I'm taking flat lays and I have a candle going, or I have like the light above our microwave on, which I tend to forget and leave on. I'll look at it and I'll be like, something's off. And then I'll look around and go, oh my goodness, it was leaving something as small as a candle on.
Yeah, it'll have that slight little color. Even in the corners, you can see it. It's funny.
Yeah.
It makes a difference.
It really does make a huge difference. And if you are taking your photos all at once, it's so for people who might work a full-time job but are trying to get their business off the ground.
Yep.
If you were to spend a Saturday morning or something just setting it up, use the plywood like Britt was talking about, paint it, set it up, and that'll make it so much easier to pull from, and you'll have that natural light flooding in.
Yep. One of my recommendations for those of us that don't have the beautiful north-facing window or a big sliding glass door, I recommend if you have a big window, find that. If you have sun peeking in, cover it with, even I used to hang sheets, white sheets, and just clamp them just to get rid of that like deep sunspot. But those of us that are in apartments or just places that have really dark light or tons of trees in front of the windows, there's a couple different options. One of them is just going to a friend's house that has a really nice light and just ask them to borrow their big, beautiful window for a day and just knock it all out and get those photos when you can. Take all your props, plan it all in advance, and just get those images that you need. And take your phone. And iPhones are amazing. I don't even have the new iPhone yet, but I know it's even better than what I'm working with. If you have an iPhone or even a smartphone and nice light, your images are more than enough. And you'll be fine. You'll be good to go. And the other recommendation I have, which is something that I didn't think about until recently, I actually started working at a co-working space that has a big, beautiful studio with, the painted white brick, and it's gorgeous. But people actually rent it out for a day use, and they bring in their products and they shoot it, and then they go home. And it's so affordable compared to what you might think. And just for a day rate to have that beautiful space to shoot in, I think it's definitely worth it to have that, to have these beautiful images and elevate your brand with those gorgeous photos.
Absolutely. I know of one of my design clients, Sincerely Amy Designs is the name of her business. She didn't have a bright white space, and for her brand, she had a lot of white space in the background and some like teals and navies and then a copper color. It was beautiful. Yeah. So she rented out Paisley and Jade, which is in Virginia. It's a rental company, but they have an awesome studio. And so she rented it out with one of our photographer friends, Andrea Pesci, and the photos turned out beautiful, but they had all kinds of chairs to pull from and desks and, because they're a rental company. Yeah. So if you're in the Virginia area, Paisley and Jade is a great place to rent out for headshots and brand photos.
That's so funny. I have a friend in Lancaster that I think used their furniture rentals for a workshop up here. So yeah.
Morgan, who's she calls herself a co-captain. She's one of the co-owners of Paisley and Jade, and I think a lot of her. So just putting in a plug for her. But I love that co-working spaces, and that's a great idea.
Even photographers that have studios in your area, I know tons of them try to rent out their spaces just for a little extra income, and it's typically very affordable as far as like renting a space goes. I think, that on top of a few props, and you can really get some fantastic images for your brand at a very low cost. So it's definitely worth looking into.
Yeah. And you can go, Katie just asked in the comments, what you use to get the marble background that you have in your Instagram feed.
So I was going to talk about that next, but
we're jumping ahead. I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. I actually have two options now. So one of them, what I've been using for probably years now, is I went on Amazon and I got marble contact paper for $15, and I applied it to the other side of my plywood. And there is my gorgeous, very expensive marble counter for $15.
That is an awesome idea.
That was what I've been using for a long time. But it's funny, actually now I've become kind of a snob, and I can tell when other people are using the contact paper from Amazon. So I still use it when I need to. But one of my other backdrops that I got that I need to actually take out and do some more shooting on because I love the way it looks is mini backdrops or mini photo backdrops. I think they're on Instagram, and they have a website. I'm actually their brand ambassador. They have
how awesome.
They have vinyl and paper backdrops, so like very affordable. Just you can buy whatever size you need. They're mini, obviously, for product photographers or for product shoots. But I have the paper version, and I think if you're on my Instagram right now, actually I can check. I think my second to last Instagram post was a marble. Of course, I have all these notifications on my phone now that I look at it.
I can pull it up too.
Yeah, so my third to last post that's talking about the Ellechat was taken on the mini backdrops or mini photo backdrops. Actually, let me look at that so I'm making sure that I'm...
Is it miniPhotoBackdrops.com?
Nope, just minibackdrops.com.
Mini backdrops. I was just there. Okay,
And that's
I'm going to drop the link.
Yep, and it's the same on their Instagram. So I'll type in their Instagram.
Awesome. And no worries, Meg. You can catch the replay when this is almost as soon as it's done. When we finish up, you can hit play and start watching it again. So don't worry. And we haven't gotten to tip number 3 yet either. So no worries. Every Ellechat replay is available. So we just dropped the mini backdrops things, links in there for you, both for Instagram and the regular account. That's a really great resource. And for $15 to have it look like a nice marble countertop.
Yep.
So helpful.
So
I love that.
She has a bunch of different things. Her vinyl's a little bit more expensive than the paper. I bought the paper and I just keep it on that table that I showed you guys. And I don't let my kids go near it, and it's held up fine. But the vinyl obviously will hold up in the long run, especially if you're traveling or if you're a product photographer and you're using it and really getting rough with it. So I would definitely recommend the vinyl if it's like a long-term purchase. But yeah, it's so great to have those backdrops just for different looks. She has wood, she has colors, she has patterns, and different marble and different stone. I think she has some concrete, like really fun stuff. So I would definitely check it out.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that resource.
Absolutely.
All right. So number 1 was to use a cohesive color palette.
Yep.
Number 2 is to utilize natural light.
Yep.
What is number 3?
So step number 3 is to style your images with intention. And that can mean different things to different people, especially it depends on what you're photographing. But recently I've noticed, and I think everybody can kind of agree, that the days of the product on the white backdrop is almost obsolete. Like, we don't really photograph our Etsy products or anything that we have for sale, or even if we're styling like an iPad to talk about our new website design, we are styling it in a more lifestyle kind of documentary setting. So I highly recommend doing that. I recommend kind of, if you can tell a story with your image. So let's say you're selling a really pretty pillow on Etsy or on your website. Instead of just photographing that pillow on a backdrop, or even on a backdrop that's not white but it matches your brand, I think you have a better chance of selling it if you're styling it on a couch or on a bed, or where you want people to eventually use that product. I think you're kind of selling the product, selling itself when it's styled in a gorgeous way.
I love that, because when you do scroll through Instagram or you're looking at a blog post or someone's website, you kind of imagine yourself in that image. Exactly. So I know when I'm scrolling through Pinterest and I see some really good looking dessert or something, or a really cute outfit, I put myself in that photo and imagine, what would it be like if I were to wear that? But if it were just to be by itself, usually the outfit is, a girl is wearing it and she's outside and like looking off to this,
and she's adorable.
Yes, but she's in an environment. It's not just the outfit by itself.
Exactly.
So I love that you say that. Try to utilize that for your client or for your audience, potential clients and customers, and help them envision what it would be like if they were to use your product or work.
Yeah. So if you can do the hard work for them. And one of my other tips, this is more for product photographers, but I've seen it and I've been victim to it, If you can take multiple products and style them in one scene, if you've ever been to IKEA and they have everything set up for you, you're like, well, I can't just buy the bedspread. Obviously, I need all 8 pillows and probably the bed frame too, so that my house can look like that as well. So if you can use multiple things together, oh, I have an alarm going off. If you can use everything together strategically, you know, it just really tells a story and kind of puts your audience, like you said, in that picture. And they're going to resonate with you, your brand, whatever message you're trying to, you know, sell or share. It's so much easier to get to with a more kind of documentary approach with your images.
I love that. So what are some ways that they can tell a story through their photos and through their styling of their images?
So as far as I always think back to Instagram. And one of my big recommendations is to kind of humanize your image, or, you know, whatever you're working with, your subject or your product. And there's a couple fun ways that I've done it in my own images, if it's possible. And I try to do it as much as I can. I will set up my camera, and you can do this with an iPhone with a pile of books or, you know, something above you. So if you're doing a flat lay, I'll set up my tripod and my camera or my iPhone, and I will make sure that I get my hands into the image. So I'm typing on the computer, or I'm writing, or I'm eating, or I'm texting, or whatever. I'm interacting with the subject or the products that I have in that image. And I think humanizing the image goes back to, you know, kind of having the audience put themselves into that image. So that's one of the ways that I do it. So I'll try to put some sort of human element, a person, hands, feet. I get a lot of feet in there. If we're working with food, I'll like take a bite of the food and like put the cookie back in. So you can tell that there's a person there that was interacting with the scene. If I have a notebook, I'll write something down. And especially if the notebook is going to be used for, you know, some sort of marketing purpose, I will try to keep the writing coordinated with whatever message I'm sending, or even the caption that I'm using. So those are the few ways that I try to humanize that image.
Yeah, I think that's so important too, because as I'm looking through Instagram feeds, if I don't see a person in it ever, it just feels very cold and impersonal. But I love, like, my favorite Instagram accounts, even if they're business accounts, like big business accounts. I love when they have, like you said, even a hand in it, or they show someone from behind. You may not even see their face, but I think it's so important to show that there's actually a person behind the brand too. Absolutely. And it's not as cold and kind of, I don't know, uninviting.
One of the
it really does make a difference.
One of the biggest tips that I heard probably at the very beginning of my career, I can't even remember where I heard it from, but it was just like the simplest saying, but it has such a huge impact, especially for those of us that are creatives and have these personal brands. But if you think about it, people buy from people. We want to know who we're working with and who we're buying from. Gone are the days where we're buying from a corporation. We would much rather support a local business or a story or some sort of, you know, anything that we can really get behind. So if we know the person that we're working with, and I think you're a perfect example of someone who really puts themselves into their brand. I think we can all resonate with your stories and your interactions with us.
Thank you. That means a lot. I think, I think the biggest thing and what I've found in business, because there's no getting around trying to sell something, whether it's your services or products, you're in business to make money.
Exactly.
But the biggest key to having people buy from you, they have to trust you. And so having those personal touches, but also that goes back to why brand photos are important in the first place, because if you look legitimate and you look professional and you're putting intention into your brand, and you're thinking through everything from not only, you know, the graphics and your logo and your color palette, but your photography, people are going to trust you and think, oh, they really know what they're doing. I can trust them and buy their product, because it'll probably be made well, or
Yep.
work with them for their services because they look legitimate and they,
Yep.
they look high quality. So
Yep.
to both ends of that, why
Yeah.
brand photos are important, but also adding the personal humanizing touch to your images too.
Yep. It can
I
go
think that's
such a long way, I think.
Yeah. What do you have any more tips for using intention with your photos?
Let me look at my notes. Yes. So one of the things that I always try to think about, especially if you're doing that bulk photo session or you're hiring somebody to do that session, you really want to think about like the end result for those photos and where they're going to wind up. So are they going to be on a slider on your website? And if so, you'll definitely want to make sure you get some images that work in a horizontal way. As far as products go, usually flat lays look really nice in a horizontal setting. But if you're going to be using them on Pinterest, obviously vertical is the way to go. If you're trying to sell products on Pinterest, I would definitely make sure that you have images that will work in that vertical setting. And then obviously social media, now we can kind of do pretty much any orientation, but I still make sure that things will look nice in a square setting, because even with Instagram, you can have vertical and horizontal now, but everything will start out
crop
as
down.
that square. And a lot of other product listings like Etsy and a couple other places that you can sell, they kind of start with the perfect square, and then when you click on it, it will get to whatever orientation. So I try to keep that in the back of my mind when I'm shooting to make sure that I kind of get everything in the different orientations. If you're doing it right, get all orientations, and that way you'll never be missing anything. So
yeah. I know when I worked with Andrea for my brand photos the first go round, she took some flat lays, but she set it up to where I could crop the image down.
Yep.
So for blog posts, I might be using the same image over and over again, but people didn't know it because I was just cropping down parts of the image, which that can be a good way to provide some versatility too.
Yeah.
And then also negative space.
Yep.
Like having negative space. So if you're using it for a blog post image or something like that where there's text.
Yeah, you want to add something to the side. That's really important too.
Yeah.
It's nice to have.
I love that you say think about how you're actually going to use them instead of just taking photos haphazardly and not thinking about.
Yeah, if you know what you're going to use them for in advance, you can definitely plan for things. Yeah, especially, Pinterest, especially if you're going to add that text, you really want to grab their attention. So a lot of my images, I have kind of like a template for my Pinterest images. So I know that I'm always going to have text at the top half and then something to fit on the bottom, which sometimes you have to really be specific with that. But it's nice to know ahead of time.
Yeah, love that. All right. So are we ready to answer some of these questions that have been coming in? Try to get through as many of them as we can. Okay. So Suzanne asks, any great suggestions on how to take branded photos for a service business without going the obvious way with a desk, computer, coffee mug, and little pretty things? She says she works within communication / brand marketing and would like some great brand photos for her new website. She says, I didn't start having customers yet, so I can't get photos from client work. So do you have any suggestions for Suzanne?
I think that's probably why it was voted up. It's a really common question that I see. And it's actually something that I had struggled with when I was starting the Inspired Editorial, because obviously I wasn't necessarily service-based, but I wasn't creating any products. So I was trying to think of, obviously as a photographer, how I could convey that message of who I wanted to talk to through images. So instead of doing kind of my own thing where I'm taking pictures of my computer and my coffee, I wanted to talk to my audience. So for me, my audience was creative entrepreneurs, photographers, artists, small business owners that had maybe a little Etsy shop or a bakery or something like that. So what I did way back when was I photographed tons of images on that piece of plywood in a way that kind of conveyed all these different personas. So I took pictures of a bunch of paint and little brushes and paper and the paint palette. So that was one of my images. And then I took pictures of some bakery goods and pastries and flour and oats and milk. So that was another image, some calligraphy items and that sort of thing. So instead of photographing kind of me and my office and my things, I photographed who I was trying to attract, were these small business owners and creatives that were creating things that I wasn't really using, but I could still kind of talk to them.
That's a really good idea. So photographing kind of the outcome in a sense, or the persona, I think that's great.
Yep.
And I know for me, that's a struggle because a lot of days I am at my desk with my coffee and my computer, and that's what's in front of me. And a lot of days I will not post on Instagram because I'm like, this is the same photo again. So trying to think of what that looks like, but that's really good to think about and focus on too, is having those having photos for your clients, like those personas. I love that. Awesome suggestion. Yeah. I hope that was helpful for you, Suzanne. All right. So 20 York Street asks, are iPhone photos ever acceptable and considered professional? I know a lot of my colleagues just snap a few photos on their iPhone and use it for their blog posts, but I just cannot. Admittedly, it saves so much time, effort, and lugging around a camera, but I just don't think iPhone will suffice. Thoughts?
So like
what are you?
Yeah, I mentioned that earlier. I think iPhones are fine. I think the problem that we run into when we're using our iPhones or any camera in general is that we're not photographing them correctly with great light. I think great light can take an image, so much further. So yeah, use your iPhone. I use it a lot. I have no issue, and I don't see any issue with using an iPhone for professional photos, as long as you're taking the right steps to photograph it in a professional way. As long as you know photography basics like great light. I think light's the problem, not the iPhone. So use your iPhone all you want.
Yeah, and I've noticed too, sometimes I'll wipe off like the little lens, because sometimes that can get sometimes that messes with the quality, and I never zoom in either because photos start to get grainy. So I've used them in blog posts before, and definitely for social media all the time. But yeah, I think you're right. It just comes down to light and how you're actually taking the photo, not necessarily the iPhone.
And actually, the second issue, the Inspired Editorial magazine that's linked down at the bottom there, that whole issue is based on visuals and creating better visuals for your brand. And we actually had Melanie from the Nomadic Wife did a whole article on how to take better Instagram images. And it's all based on iPhoneography. And she has some really great tips. So I would definitely check that out. It's a free magazine. Yeah.
That is so helpful. Yeah, definitely check that out. I know my friend Chaitra from itspinkpot.com is coming out with an iPhoneography course too.
Oh, yeah.
So, so if anyone's interested, she's coming out with that soon. But yeah, iPhones, so helpful. And just like you said too in your question, that lugging your DSLR around everywhere can be so hard. So your phone, you take it with you anywhere anyway. So great question. Stephanie asks, how do you get to achieve the same look between photographs? If I'm photographing during different days, even if it's set at the same hour, the light ends up making a huge difference. I can't get a uniform look for the life of me.
So I think that kind of goes back to what I was saying about like the sun shining in. For me, if I'm in that room across the hall that I showed you with the north-facing window, I pretty much get the same light in there all day long, morning till night. It's just that really soft light. But if you're in, like, for example, the room that I'm in now, in the morning, I could have that bright sun. And then in the afternoon, I kind of have some wonky shadows and really yellow color casts or green coming off the trees. So the way that I kind of would combat that before I moved across the hall was with those sheer curtains, or with that really light sheet to kind of diffuse that harsh light coming in. that brought like the sunspots, the shadows, and the yellowish cast. So I think just a really simple curtain or anything white, as white as you can get it. I wouldn't use any different colors, but I think that could really help with the different lighting situations.
Yeah, great question and great answer. Lynn asks, and I'll try to get through a couple more. We only have a few more minutes. Lynn said, if you don't have a source of natural light, our house is very dark, then can you use LED lights, white lights, or do you have to get a light kit or special lighting for photos? Also, what type of editing tools should we use? Are there any free ones? So first, what about the natural light? Not enough natural light.
So, like I said, I don't use any artificial lights. I tried it once and I hated it, and I couldn't really mimic the natural light look, and it was expensive, and it was this huge learning curve, which I think most of us business owners kind of already have a million other things to learn. So learning studio light on top of it was just one more like really frustrating thing. So, I guess in this instance, I would recommend kind of what I said earlier. If you can find a space that you could borrow from a friend that has a really gorgeous, I mean, it could be a friend with a small apartment that just happens to have that really nice light, and you can just put your little plywood down and go to town for a day. Or if you know of a place that has like a studio rental for an affordable price, I would definitely look into that. And I would recommend that before I would recommend learning studio lights. Yeah. But if you have the means and you have the resources to learn and purchase that, and you're taking photos, you know, on a more daily basis, that is something that you could look into if it makes more sense for your business. But personally, I don't do anything with studio lights.
Yeah. What about editing resources?
There's a lot of options out there, especially as far as iPhones go. Personally, I use Lightroom, which you can get a $10 a month subscription to Lightroom and Photoshop. That's what I use. It's definitely, there's a learning curve behind Lightroom, but once you get it, it's fantastic. You can do so much in there. And then I use presets in there, which kind of keeps everything looking uniform and matching. I make my own presets, but there's tons that you can buy out there. Another option, if you're looking for free, you can use any of the apps from the App Store if you're on Apple. ViscoCam, VSCO Cam is great. People love that. They have tons of filters on there. Let me type that in.
Yeah, that's the one I use, and I love it. How do you feel too? And I know someone may have asked this question. I thought I saw it before we jumped on about filters. What do you think about filters? So while we're on the subject of editing,
I go back and forth about filters. I guess it kind of depends on the mood that I'm in. So for me, I would not use the ViscoCam filters for like.
Sorry, we're keeping it casual over here.
That's fine. Yeah, I didn't use the filters that they provided for a really long time. I was like anti-filters, you know, I'm going to do everything by hand. And within ViscoCam, you can like do every step of the editing process yourself. You can adjust the exposure, the white balance. You can add that light like matte effect. You can pretty much do anything. But then I got really lazy. And I also really started liking the look of that like film, like, you know, hipster fun look. So I started doing that. But I think, I mean, I don't really feel one way or the other right now. I would just suggest being as consistent as possible. So for me, consistent in the beginning was editing all of my photos exactly the same way on the ViscoCam by hand. And then now I use some filters, at least for my personal Instagram. I would use the same filter from that app every time. So that kind of kept everything looking more similar than what, you know, using a different filter every time would just kind of make it look crazy. And for the Inspired Editorial, my Instagram, I use my own presets that I made. So that kind of keeps everything more consistent. So I don't think there's anything wrong with filters. I think just consistency would keep everything looking more professional.
Yeah. I find myself for every single photo, because I love white,
Yep.
bright images.
Yep.
I'll bump up the brightness on ViscoCam and then bump up the saturation a little bit too, because I like the pops of color too.
Yeah.
But I love that consistency is key.
Yeah,
in
definitely.
all of the branding, photos
Exactly.
included. So that's awesome. Well, that hour went by so fast.
That did go by right.
But thank you so much for joining in, Brit. And tell us one more time, for people who want to follow along with you after this, where can they find you?
So I am on the inspirededitorial.com. That is my current blog and website. Right now, there's not much you can buy on there. You just go and you can be inspired by some creatives that I featured. You can download the free digital magazine. We have 2 issues out right now. The second one, like I said, it was dedicated specifically to visuals, so you'll definitely find a lot in there. And I actually wrote down some of the articles that we have in there. So in the second issue, I have recommended cameras, which I think would be really helpful to a lot of you. And I think some people have asked about that.
Awesome.
So, entry level to the really expensive cameras, you can take a look, and it's, DSLRs and the mirrorless, which are becoming more popular. Awesome. And then there's also some gear that you can beef up your iPhone with. So like they make little lenses now for your iPhones. So I talked about that. One of the other articles is how to build a strong online presence, which kind of goes back to what we were talking about, and visuals plays a huge part in that. And then, like I said, the article by Melanie, how to take killer Instagram images. So if you want that second issue, just go to theinspirededitorial.com/magazine. And I think that button right there will link you directly there, and it'll go straight to your inbox.
Awesome. Thank you for providing that too, that link. So useful.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah. And then they can find you too on Instagram at the Inspired Editorial.
Yep. I can type that in.
Awesome. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much, Brit.
Absolutely.
This was a blast. So many
helpful
tips too. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yep. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, everyone's saying thanks. All right.
Thank you, guys.
Y'all. Yeah. Bye, Brit.
Bye.
So guys, thank you so much for tuning in today. I hope that you enjoyed this, and best wishes with your brand images. The next Ellechat isn't next Thursday, it's the following Thursday. And I'm going to be talking about my launch strategy for Freelance Academy. I mixed things up this go round. And I'm really excited to share the ins and outs of how I prepped for the course, went through a validation round, and then launched it, putting a heavier emphasis on my list. So I'm really excited to share about that. So if you're interested, you can click on my account, either through a comment, you can click on my actual profile through Crowdcast, or there should be another little circle with my photo on it somewhere on this screen. I don't know what your screen looks like. But if you click on that, you can not only find my other Elechats, but you can also follow along with my account so that any future Elechats, you'll be the first to know about it. But I hope that you all have an awesome rest of your Thursday. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope to see you in another Ellechat soon. Bye, guys.